Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. We're in a brand new book this week, the book of Nehemiah. And the theme of the book of Nehemiah is Reconstruction. So the story is he's the wall guy.
The wall guy.
That was a pre-recording conversation we had. And today we're going to look at Nehemiah chapter 2. And as we started last week, we're just going to ask one question. And so let me read a couple of verses and then we'll talk about this one question. It says, early the following spring, so to a little background, Nehemiah has found that he's heard news that his city is in disrepair. And it says, early the following spring in the month of Nisan, during the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was serving the king his wine. And let me just stop right here and say, there are questions about whether Nehemiah wrote this book or not.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will attribute it to Ezra,
Mm-hmm.
but this is first person here, so you have to believe he at least wrote part of it. It says, I was serving the king his wine. I had never before appeared sad in his presence. So the king asked me, why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. Then I was terrified, but I replied, long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. And the king asked, well, how can I help you? With a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, if it please the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. So he looks despondent. The king asks him what's going on. He says, how can I help you? And so Nehemiah first asked, can I go back? And then he asked for letters for supplies.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be what he asked later. And the king gives him his full support.
Mm-hmm.
He gives him the time to go. He helps him write the letters so he can get the materials that he needs. And there's this concept about if you see a turtle on a fence post, he didn't get there by himself.
Mm-hmm.
That reality is none of us get anywhere of significance by ourselves. But usually before there is this offering a favor, I'm going to do this for you, there is some groundwork built to lead up to that. So the question that I want to ask today is, what kind of things go into gaining favor with other people? What kind of actions do you take, or life do you live, or things need to take place for you to gain the good graces of other people?
I think this is an interesting question because I think that people who are out to gain the good favor of people would often go about it differently than people who actually gain it in an authentic way.
What would some of those differences be, do you think?
I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like if I meet someone or somebody enters my life and you can feel that. You can feel the like I am just trying to gain your favor as opposed to this is who I actually am.
Right.
And I think that some of the differences would be, there's a difference between somebody doing a job well and somebody doing something to kind of like suck up to you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any other way to put it.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And there's a difference between having the time to watch somebody's life and see that they're honest and they're trustworthy and that they are forthcoming about things, as opposed to someone who seems like, that's somebody's character, as opposed to someone who seems to be trying to get somewhere and they need you to help them get there.
Yeah, I think that having feeling like you're being used by somebody, or feeling like they're just trying to get to know you, trying to create a relationship with you because they know down the line it's going to pay off.
There's an ulterior motive.
Yes,
Yeah.
that never feels very good.
No.
And I also don't like to feel like I owe someone something.
Mm-hmm.
In this situation, what could the king possibly owe Nehemiah? The king is the king. It's not like he owes him anything. Yet he does all this for him not because, oh, well, he has to pay Nehemiah back in some way for all of his years of serving him wine, but because he genuinely cares about him. You can tell there's a relationship there. And so I think that with anything, I think when it comes to building favor with people, I think it just comes down to building a genuine relationship with them, um, putting their needs before your own, looking out for them, genuinely caring about them, the things they say, and just walking alongside them in life. And I think that those things naturally build favor
Hmm.
and in an authentic way that won't make the person feel like, oh, they're just trying to use me in some way.
This is a really difficult question for me because one, I'm a discernment gut kind of person, and if I feel like you are angling for something, I will almost always resist, even if you're the best person to do it. You know, it's just my nature. And there are other times that I feel like it's genuine, and there are people who do the same things that I feel differently about. And so it's not always actions that, for me, I'm just speaking for me, that tip me off. You know, it's interesting that the king, we don't know how long, particularly Nehemiah, had been serving. Right off the top of my head, I don't, if it's in the first chapter. But he apparently was a good wine server. Well, I mean, that does sound kind of weird. Like, can you imagine?
A sommelier.
Huh?
I said a sommelier.
That's different. Yeah, I think that's different.
Well, you don't want them to taste it before they give it to you. Like you did.
I think they had. That's right.
Yeah.
They had to taste it,
Yep.
so they knew there was no poison.
Yeah,
in it.
because
There
if you
is
drop
some-
dead, then
Right.
he
There's some
wasn't
trust
gonna
built
drink
there
it.
as
You
well.
know,
then.
and
Right.
you say that it's interesting that the toast, the cheers, was for that purpose. I learned this when I was in Germany, the very first time speaking. As a matter of fact, it was a surreal experience to begin with because I was over there teaching for a group of Assembly of God churches, which was very similar to the tribe that I grew up in. And the overseer for the entire nation was there, and he took us all to dinner after it was over with, and he ordered the entire table beer. He ordered beer for everybody. I was like, would never have happened in a Pentecostal church at home. But they talked about how it was a part of, people don't drink it to get drunk. They drink it like tea, like sweet tea. It's just, they drink one. But anyway, they always had the toast, cheers, and you bump glasses. And he said the origins of that were that, you always did that, and you did it hard enough that it splashed out. And so if you had poisoned their drink in the toast, you were going to get some in yours, and you were going to die as well. So the cheers was the way to keep them from, slipping something in your drink. But, he apparently was good at his job, and he apparently had a personal relationship with the king, for the king to notice, because, like, well, y'all know me well enough. There are people I can walk by and I don't notice whether they're distraught or bothered. I'm just kind of in my own lane. But there are other people, like, if something's off, I notice it, and I'll say something. I'll pay attention. But it's usually built around relationship. Usually it's built where I've spent enough time with them, like, something's not quite right here, and. And you stop, a couple of weeks ago, I was walking down the hall and I spoke to somebody that I knew pretty well in the church, and their response back to me said, "Hey, something's not quite right here." And I was turning to leave, and I turned back. I was like, "What's going on?" And they shared a few things, and I stopped to pray. And by the time I left, I mean, they're bawling, I just believe he had to have a personal relationship with the king. They were almost like friends for the king to say, something's off. You must be deeply troubled. You don't look sick. What's going on? And from my perspective, the thing that if I'm going to do something extraordinary for you, I want there to be some kind of personal relationship. You know, let me back up. I'm most likely to help somebody that I have an extraordinary, a good personal relationship with, or I have no relationship with at all. If I think you're in my life and you try to take advantage of me, I will go out of my way not to help you. Like that's maybe you are not as spiteful as I am. That's my ungodliness coming out.
I don't know. I tell because yeah, I've had questions for my kids about stuff like that, especially when they were younger, and I'm like, look, if you give because God asked you to, then you did your part. You can't control anything once it
Mhm.
leaves your hands.
What kind of things do you think people do that are manipulative?
Well, I think that some people do treat relationships as a transactional thing. You know, we talked about this a lot at camp, and that I was talking with a student who was saying that like, oh, you know, well, I don't, they're not giving me enough in the relationship, and it was a close friend of theirs, and I talked to them about that. I said like, well, do you feel that they need to be constantly be doing something for you in order for it to be worth it? Because there will be times when in a relationship you're not getting anything out of it and it's draining you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you use the example of Christ. You know, he died for us on the cross. He gave us everything, and we could never even compare what we want to give, what we could give him, and yet still he did it for us. Even knowing our entire lives, knowing all the bad we would do, he still did that for us, and he wants a relationship with us, and he doesn't just want it to be transactional. And so I think that for us, I think that's one thing that's for me is a red flag, in that if someone's like, as soon as they're not getting any benefit, they pull out. I don't think that shows that it's not really an authentic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's just showing that I'm only in this as long as it serves me. Whereas true relationships sometimes will have bad times, good times, just like in marriage, you know, or in the most major relationship we'll have in this life. There will be good times, there will be bad times, but if the person's just going to pull out as soon as things go sour, um, they're not in it for the right reasons. And so sometimes it's good to test the waters a little bit, test the relationship.
I agree with that. That when people, I think people show themselves when they're not committed to something, how they actually feel about it. I guess you, if you're
Yeah.
talking about a relationship, but I think people can be manipulative also by trying to gain like personal information about you or to pull out of you how you feel about certain things because if you have influence in one place or another and they can kind of get that from you, then politics is a great example of that. People who are manipulative can turn one person against another to whatever the favor is that they're looking for.
When our kids do that
Oh
early,
my gosh, yeah.
they turn a parent against
They
the
try
parent.
it anyway.
Yeah, in a hurry.
Mhm.
They'll ask what daddy said or mama
Mhm.
said, and it turns sour quick. I, I, I'll give you an example. I spent a significant amount of money recently for um, on a business consultant, and 4 different people from the same company approached me about it. And I ended up buying from one. And Barbara asked me, because she was with me every time, what was different? What was different? And I said, I felt like the person genuinely was trying to address my needs,
Mhm.
Instead of, you know, what can I get out of this? The other ones were asking a whole different set of questions. It's just a whole different approach. And I'm as high strung as I can be. I do not like that kind of pitch to me. I would much rather a low key, hey, let's understand it. And I think that trust for me is a big deal. Like if I trust you, if I can figure out a way to trust you, or we can work to where there's trust, I'll do whatever I can. If I don't trust you, So he asked Nehemiah several questions. How long are you going to be gone? Because he apparently wanted him back to taste his wine. How long are you going to be gone? What's it going to take? What do you need from me? All of those things are trust questions to me, because you want that person to come back. You want them to be a part of your life. And so I think it's something that all of us might not be aware of, how we walk into people's lives trying to transact, how we are trying to get something out of them. An example for me as pastor, I know pastors who are great at this. Like, they have meals on a regular basis with high capacity givers. It is not I can't do it. I feel nasty. If I know I'm going to a meal with a person for the sole purpose of asking them to give money, I just can't do it. Like, I can't do it. Now, there are other people, and they make it look so genuine, and they'll tell you, it's all about the kingdom of God. And I don't want to say it's not. I don't want to pretend like it's not. But just for me, like, I can't do it. I don't know.
But if somebody had the ability to do another job for you, would you feel okay about asking them to do that? If it wasn't monetary?
Yeah, and so that's what I usually get told by most of these pastors. That's usually what they'll tell me. You don't have a problem asking anybody else with a gift to do something. Why is this a struggle? And I don't really have a good answer other than that's a place of,
maybe it has something to do with the way that you don't want to be perceived.
That's possibly. I don't want to be perceived that way, and I don't really want somebody doing me that way.
Right.
Like,
sure.
I like you to make an appeal, lay out the facts, and then let me and the Holy Spirit decide what we're going to do. And I prefer to treat people that way. Giving is just one of those things. I don't know. I see preachers manipulate it too much, and it bothers me. Like, it's hard to manipulate a volunteer for a children's department, but it's not difficult to manipulate money in the kingdom. And I think it's a dangerous thing.
I want to make a point real quick before we close out, pertaining to what you just said, that I appreciate the fact that when he was asked that question, he was very straightforward and said, this is why I'm upset. This is what I need to do, and this is what I need to do it, And I think that's the way that I prefer to be with people and for people to be with me, because, like you said, at that point you get to make up your mind about it, but at least you know what you're dealing with. And I that makes me trust somebody much more when they're really upfront with something like that.
I would 100% agree with that. And I believe that conversation gives us some insight into the trust that they had with one another. He knew he could tell him whatever it was, and it was going to be received well. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll be back tomorrow as we take a look at the next chapter in the book of Nehemiah.